This conference will now be recorded.
All right.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. First order of business is to do a roll call. Bill, you or Fanchon willing to do that?
Fanchon?
I can do that. Chair George Mason,
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Anderson,
Here.
and Jennifer Knott.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, items for individual consideration. Citizens may speak on action items listed on the agenda. A request to speak card should be completed and returned to the city clerk, or an email should be sent to the deputy city clerk at fstearns@cityofdenison.com prior to the board reaching this section of the agenda. Citizen comments are limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise required by law. Comments related to public hearings, if any, will be heard when the specific hearing is called. Okay, item A, to receive report, hold a discussion, and take action on the minutes from the July 21st, 2020 meeting. Any comments? Changes?
Ms. Anderson, I move approval of the minutes.
This is Jennifer Knott. I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye, Jennifer.
Aye, George. Makes me chuckle every time we do this. There's only 3 of us. Any nays? There being none, then the minutes are approved from the last meeting. Okay, moving on to the second item. Item B, receive report, hold a discussion, and take action on a request for the addition of an awning at 108 West Main Street, case number 2020-045H. Mr. Medina?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you for everyone for being here. And Linda, you weren't here when we briefly discussed this. I'm working with our city manager on trying to get some more historic preservation board members appointed here. So if you know any friends, please have them reach out to us. So regarding this,
The board is meant to be 5 people, right?
That's correct.
I believe that maybe there's a list of people who have entered their possibilities to be board or commission members, and they might have filled out the forms and those be sitting around somewhere.
I'll get with our city clerk and see what they have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So regarding case number 2020-045H, the Denison Police Department is requesting the approval of a new awning towards the rear of their building. The proposed awning will be used to protect police equipment and from the outside elements. 108 West Main is a non-contributing building. City staff recommends approval. Here's a drawing of the proposed awning and its height. Here is an image of the location. As you can see, they were previously approved for an awning directly to the south of where this new one will go. You can see their equipment out in the open. Here's an aerial of the front of the building. And this yellow highlighted section is where the proposed new awning or cover will be placed. The material and color will match the building. So I'm present for any questions that you may have, and we recommend approval.
Any comments?
I move approval for the awning.
This is Jennifer Knott. I second.
George Mason. All those in favor say aye.
Anderson, aye.
Knott, aye.
Mason, aye. Those opposed? There being none, the motion is carried and accepted. Thank you. Moving on to item C, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on a request for the addition of a sculpture located within the 300 block of West Main Street, case number 2020-046H. Mr. Medina.
Thank you.
You're
The
welcome.
proposed sculpture will commemorate the Main Street fire of October 2019. Sculpture will be proportionate and similar to the size of the existing guitar sculpture also on Main Street. So we're looking at about, I guess, 8 to 9 feet height. Here is the initial sketch of the sculpture. I've been informed by Councilman Brian Hander that the sculpture will be created out of components that were taken from the wreckage and destruction of the fire that occurred last year on the 300 block. Here is the proposed location, somewhere in front of these buildings that are leveled now, as you can see. We recommend approval of this sculpture. I've also, done a little bit of research on the proposal and reviewing their proposal. The sculpture can be relocated since we're going to be upgrading our Main Street and doing the D3 project. This sculpture can be installed before the project and then reinstalled after the project, which I think is really useful for the applicant to be doing that for us. So I'm present for any questions, and we recommend approval.
Any comments? Can I have a motion?
I make a motion that the sculpture proposed for the 300 block of West Main commemorating the fire of October 2019 be approved.
I second the motion. This is Anderson.
All in favor?
I, Anderson.
I, not.
Aye, Mason. Those opposed? There being none, then the motion is carried and we can move on to the next item. Item number D, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on a request for modifications to the rear of 421 West Main Street, case number 2020-017H. Mr. Medina.
Thank you. With this item here, I'll be making a couple of revisions to our staff report. Some information was brought to my attention and I just overlooked some things. So I want to make sure that I clear that up in the minutes and in this recording. So the applicant is proposing the addition of a roll-up door. This would need to create a new cut and opening in the existing brick. My previous review of the project interpreted this to be that it was using an existing opening, and I'll clarify that here in a second with some pictures. Removal of miscellaneous attachments, a wooden fence with a gate. We recommend approval of those changes. I've also done a little bit more research. Usually we don't want to recommend approval of painting of unpainted brick on the facade, or the rear of the building in contributing buildings. Now the applicant is only requesting to paint, which is a historically approved color, cozy white, I believe, it's listed in the report, the rear of the building. When I went in and inspected some of the brick, I noticed that there was a deterioration on some of the brick, and where if I really wanted to, some of those pieces could come off. So I think being able to apply some brick to at least the rear only could create some weatherization and protect these bricks from further decay. So we do actually recommend approval of the unpainted brick, but only on the rear. Now the applicant also submitted further documents that were attached in the staff report that show a proposed future balcony and rooftop addition. This item is not to take action on the rooftop or the balcony until we can pursue potential alternatives or other avenues that would satisfy the developer while preserving the historical features of the building. And with these slides, I'm going to get into some of those items here in a second. Here's the proposed building, 421 West Main, outlined in yellow. Here is a drawing for the modifications. The applicant will be pursuing a conditional use permit to operate an ice house in our central area. That's generally something that's been done in the past, so I don't foresee any kind of issue with the Planning and Zoning Commission or City Council as long as we, get a complete application to work everything through. As you can see, there's the attached red outline to the ice house. That's where the opening is going to be for the new garage door. And you can see the outline of the fence as well and the gate. Here's what the rear of the building looks like today. The applicant's also proposing to paint the trim of this building, this rear building, black or noir with the white, cozy white brick being painted. And then you can see all the various attachments that will be removed. You can see the small fence on the bottom that will be upgraded to a full privacy fence that will extend out along the property line. This image here shows where the new opening is proposed to be cut. Here are the yellow arrows to explain that. Just to clarify, when I went and looked at this building before, I thought the applicant was requesting approving this door to the left. However, that's a different building, so that was an error on my end. I also went out there today to take a look, and I can't find any indication that this separate building where the ice house is proposed to be has a historical structure. So I don't anticipate that any modifications there to affect the contributing status, historic contributing status of this property. We met with the Texas Historic Commission, and they provided us with this awesome picture, which we didn't have previous access to, of Main Street in 1920. And what you can see here outlined in these yellow arrows is 421 West Main. For about 100 years, at least, 421 West Main has maintained the top part of the building, which is quite rare. If you go by there today, you'll see that at least above those transoms, this building is almost identical to this photo here, which is quite remarkable. That being said, that's going to lead us into our discussion topic, our non-action item. The Historic Commission, the State Historic Commission has provided us with some background explaining that the addition of this proposed balcony in front of you could render the structure as historically non-contributing due to the disproportionality, the addition of new materials. You would be fundamentally altering the front of this facade here in a manner that may not be easily reversible. To speak to the reversibility aspect mentioned in our guidelines and from the state, for example, the applicant wants to replace the doors with more modern, more efficient doors, which we can work with. However, we recommend that the applicant retain and store those doors. That way, if the building is ever in jeopardy of being considered non-contributing, we can put those older contributing doors back on the building and preserve that historical character. With an addition like a balcony, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would be significantly altering these architectural features irreversibly. And here is the rendering that the applicant was also proposing. And that is, I think that wraps up my report. I'm present for any questions, and we're open to discussion on this topic after we can, or before or after we take an action.
Well, I think I'd prefer to take action on the items for the rear of the building first, and to have a further discussion after that in regards to the front facade. So if someone would like to make a motion.
I would ask that if it is the will of this board, that the motion do reflect repainting or painting of the rear brick. That was not included in what was typed out.
Right.
And the creation of a new opening for the window.
Do I have a motion? I'm trying to get to what the board recommended.
I know, me too. It's over the recommendation.
About there.
Okay. So this is Jennifer Knott. I move to approve the proposed changes at 421 West Main to include installation of a wooden fence with metal gate, replacement of doors. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Adding a door. A replacement of the back doors, removal of miscellaneous wall attachments, the painting of the window and door trim, the installation of the roll-up metal door on the accessory structure, as well as painting the rear bricks.
Perfect.
Do I have a second?
I second. Oh, thank you, George.
Those in favor?
Not I.
Mason, aye. Linda?
Anderson, aye.
Thank you.
You're
Those
welcome.
opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved. The changes to the rear of the building can go ahead as outlined.
Thank you.
Now, as far as the other items, we wanted to discuss these. Well, there are two things. There's only one thing that's not recommended, and that is the balcony or the rooftop addition. Rhonda, is there anything you'd like to add to this conversation at this point?
I would. There are a couple of ways that would be less invasive. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why I have Corey here, because he will be more technical, but the rooftop was a second phase down the way, so that can be eliminated there. I have rooftop access as it is, and it just will, perhaps at a later time I can address that. I've been visiting with Corey about a less invasive fashion for this quote balcony, and would you explain that?
I would suggest, just so that it doesn't take so much away from the historical value of the front facade of the building, but allowing us to install the balcony without the columns and without the roof. If you look at the front of the building, you can see there's still physical evidence that there was an awning at some point in the history of the building. So basically, we would just be adding a structural balcony where the awning was before.
Hey, Joe, one of my major problems with the design is the removal of the center window and widening that opening to accommodate a double door.
So what if we delete that as a compromise and she just gains access to the balcony by going through the window?
Ladylike. And actually the opening is rather standard, so it could be changed back. If I utilize the window opening now, I could actually create some sort of a stairwell interior, nothing permanent, that gave me access to where the bottom of the window is, and I could simply put a door in that opening and then replace it with the window at a later time. So I'll hang on to that as well as those front doors. Kind of back to that front facade regarding the front doors and my storage of them. I celebrate that. I think that would be wonderful. Right now, just for energy's sake, utilizing them has really been just, as whether it's really hot now and cold later, but just as far as the full turnkey of the front of the building. I also don't want to modify the integrity. The whole appeal of even coming here was that very thing. So if we can do something less invasive, that would still create that, I don't know, I feel like the whole hashtag Denison forward and revitalization effort, I think it'd be kind of a cool appeal. Just the value too to the building. I mean, I have to think of commercial leasing the space and then possibly residentially leasing it, just to add extra living space and just appeal to the building. But I too don't want to blemish the integrity. I just want to really add to it, I hope.
I like the design. If this were not an historic building, I'd go, say go ahead, but it violates some of the rules put down by the state on preserving an historic building in a district such as ours.
Well, so
The idea of possibly just using the windows as an entrance and exit to a modified deck, I think that might work. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back to the manuals and the guidelines to see.
would you mind also, when you investigate that, checking to see if utilizing the existing opening, the existing window opening, if I could install a door and then replace it at another time if necessary, would also be acceptable?
You're saying to change the height of the window opening?
No. I wouldn't
Opening
change one
exactly the
thing
same.
structurally. I would utilize the same opening, the middle window opening,
Yeah.
and just replace it with a single hinge door
Okay.
as my opening to the balcony. Does that make sense as an access?
So you would be closing the window with a door, is that correct?
I would be replacing the existing middle window with just a single hinge door of the same size, everything. So I'm not changing anything regarding the opening size, anything like that. That way, just like with the front doors downstairs, I would save that window, and it's not a historic window. I mean, it's just but I'll save that, and in case there's a need to go back to that, just as I would the doors downstairs.
I suspect you'd be able to find a door or be able to have a door made that would
Yes,
resemble the window. So
yeah, I'll have it custom made, and I'll have it actually to match since the painting the front of the building was not an option over that brick. I would keep it the same trim color as those existing windows. I do have a quick question with the top. Sorry, what is this little? The very top, the top pediment of the building. So my paint there is chipping pretty significantly. If I repaint that, do I just need to go back with that existing color? Do I have to get that approved in a different fashion?
I can approve that for you administratively. We would like to match that color if you can find it.
Okay.
And if not, we have approved colors which we can use. That'll take us about 10 minutes to go through.
All right. I may just tie it in with the white for the back then. Okay.
One of the things I want to point out to the board, to the applicant, that was brought to our attention by our state representatives. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try to manipulate this a little bit for you guys. But the awning is actually down here. So there was never, well, according to this picture, as of 1920, there wasn't any kind of structure that was at level that would be flush with the balcony, where you're proposing it to be with this door / window that's being proposed. So I want to understand a little bit about how that would be attached to the building, and if that, I'm not sure if that would conform with the historical integrity of the building and architectural features.
Well, and it may be too, Bill, that the because the evidence is there as far as the anchors that were utilized and all of that, but it may have been at a later date, obviously. So I wouldn't, again, I don't want to make or create new structural changes now that knowing that we really kind of cannot do that other than utilizing the building's offerings as it stands.
Ron and George, my only concern is from the original drawings you did of the awning or the deck, there'd be considerable steel work inside the building to cantilever that.
Correct, and not now. If we went with the new design that we are discussing now, the drawings would be quite different. Am I right?
Yeah, basically we'd use 2 C-channel I-beams, metal I-beams that would butt up against the exterior walls, and then a bolt would pass all the way through the exterior wall using the exterior walls as support. And so we would make 2 6-inch by 8-inch holes on the front of the building, and that is it.
putting a balcony on the front of a building, to my mind, on Main Street is a pretty substantial change. And I think it's one that needs to be really considered because it's opening up a potential kettle of worms as far as what happens when people start wanting to put things on the front of buildings that are not part of the historic nature of the building.
Well,
Mr. Medina, how did the state weigh in on that?
So according to them, in our discussion, they were saying that, while of course there were buildings with awnings, not awnings, with balconies in this time period that the building was created, there were none and have been no evidence of them existing in Denison, especially on Main. And so that also played a role in the recommendation that we shouldn't pursue a balcony. He also referenced a guideline, I think it's 4.2 and 4.3, which discusses that additions or alterations to building facades should maintain very similar or close to similar materials, and that the addition shouldn't obstruct from the facade or the actual building itself. And he's precisely pointed out those two guidelines as being one of the main foundations for their recommendation.
How is it Domino's group?
May I ask a couple of questions just about, I guess, the process, or I don't want to interrupt anyone if there was a
no, certainly go ahead, Rhonda.
exchange going. I'm looking at the historic photograph, and I just have a question about the building. For instance, right now I have a twin building, right? And that facade, if you look at the building to the right in the photograph, is significantly different than it is now. So it was, I think, down the way, perhaps someone else must have purchased it, refaced it to match it so it looks like a twin building. Does that make sense?
Yes. I believe that happened somewhere around 1915, and for whatever reason, they decided to match the design on 921.
On 4, yeah, right, okay. And that was my question, because I've seen similar photographs to this, but not this one. And I think I'm just curious about like the roof. Then since I'm not really doing the rooftop itself, but I know that it does make an aesthetic change to the Main Street face, regarding just other properties that are being renovated now. And there's a lot that are, I realize that are not, but just that accountability of, maintenance on existing things that are grandfathered in, as well as launching kind of the new, I don't know, just working with the architecture look of things and the business ignition, as well as traffic ignition as that grows north, just to be able to accommodate that. What was their process, and as far as how the state Main Street Commission approved those map changes? Is it just because it wasn't as radical in their eyes, or?
Rhonda, basically, from the time I've been on the committee, which is not real long, that everyone who makes changes to the facade of a building on Main Street goes through this process. And we recently had a building in the 200 block. It was at 208 West Main Street, where it was covered with metal back in the 50s. And there are photos, historic photos, showing that building the way it was originally. And then some years later, when they replaced windows with glass block, and when they removed the metal from the facade of the building, they discovered that a lot of the detail from the original facade was still there, with the exception that there's still some glass block windows here and there. So they are trying to take the building back to the way it may have looked back in the 50s. But they essentially went through the same process that you're going through. And we understand that we understand that some things just aren't feasible because of finances and because of materials that are available these days.
Right, understood. Thank you.
Now, back in 1915, I doubt that they even cared about maintaining the historic appearance of some of the building facades, which is probably why that took place. And then back in I think it was around the 50s, somebody went down Main Street and put metal facades on a lot of the buildings and put stucco on some of them. And we're having to deal with that now.
Mr. Medina, I know that the alternatives for this board is that we may table, deny, or approve. Do we have a recommendation one way or another?
So we have taken action on the rear items. I'm not
Yes.
looking for, and I don't believe we should. It's my recommendation that we don't act on any specific modifications without being able to review the alternatives in detail. That being said, I know I mentioned with George Mason before, what about the potential of doing some sort of balcony to the rear and improving that area? That way we can maintain the historic contributing status on the front, but still give the applicant the capacity to do some sort of access on the back and satisfy her potential users and clients.
And just so I have that, I have a deck off of the back of the loft, as well as access to the rooftop off of the back of the building.
I think my suggestion at this point, Mr. Medina, is to table the issue, and we can take further discussion in the future and see what Rhonda and Joe happen to come up with as proposals.
This is Anderson, and I am
Thank you.
certainly not in a position at this point that I would be willing to approve it as it looks. So in that regard, we need to have some more work on it. And I agree, Mr. Mason, that what we need to do is table it and invite it being presented to us again in a more complete and perhaps modified form.
This is Jennifer Knott, and I agree too. In addition to getting a better understanding of how this impacts the streetscape and the contributing nature of the building.
So, Mr. Medina, do you need a motion to table?
Yes, ma'am, that would be helpful. And what I can do is I'll communicate with Ms. Rhonda here and some of our staff internally and maybe one or two of the board members. We can't have a quorum outside of a meeting, but I can intermittently reach out to each of the board members and receive your feedback and understanding. So that way we can get this in a position where we are able to move forward.
Considering that, Mrs. Anderson, I move that it be tabled until we have further information and understanding.
This is Jennifer Knott. I second that motion to table.
Those in favor?
Anderson, aye.
Knott, aye.
Mason, aye. Opposed? There being none, the motion's carried. Rhonda and Joe, we appreciate you joining us today for this meeting.
Definitely.
And
Thank you so much for just your consideration. That's very.
you're quite welcome. I'm looking forward to working with you on this. And
we will get you new modified drawings to, I suppose, just to Mr. Medina. Is that?
yes,
Okay.
that'll be
Thank
excellent.
you so much for your commitment to doing such a great job on restoring this building. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the work and the concept. I just need to know more about intrusion of a balcony on the streetscape.
I definitely understood.
We'll come up with some new drawings that I'm sure you'll like.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I
Thank
love
you.
it here.
Thank you both. It's been great. We're excited.
Well, I love it here. So thank you.
Great. Yay.
Thank
Great.
you. Glad to have you here.
Mr. Medina, do you have some staff updates for us?
Not today. I'll be reaching out to everybody about this project, and then when we have some items for our next meeting. I currently don't have anything on the list, but sometimes things come up, and I want to try and get them through the process, so stay tuned.
Excellent, we appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Can I
Thank
have
you.
a motion to close the meeting?